Assalamu alaikum students, welcome back to class. The essay that we're going to be doing today is going to be the last one from The Spectator, and after that we'll be moving on to one of the great essayists, that is Charles Lamb. So this is from the series of The Spectator. This is going to be the last essay, and the number that this one has been allotted is 115. Now, when we started doing these essays from The Spectator, I told you that a total of 555 essays were published, written by Joseph Addison and Richard Steele. So we have discussed essays on various topics and essays related to various areas of interest. The one that we're going to be doing today is one that concerns not only people from the aristocracy, but it also concerns ordinary people. It concerns you, it concerns me. So without further ado, let us see what we are going to be dealing with today. True to the tradition of The Spectator, this essay also starts with a quotation in the Latin, this time from Juvenal, and translated, this means a sound mind in a healthy body. Now, this is an adage that is that's something that you hear almost from the moment that you enter school. A lot of importance is given to intellectual pursuits, a lot of importance is given to physical pursuits. And whenever you have playtime, or what we call physical training or physical exercise time, what you are emphasized again and again is the importance of exercise for not only the body but also the mind. And now we're going to see how the essayist deals with this topic. Bodily labor, he says, is of two kinds, either that which a man submits to for his livelihood, or that which he undergoes for his pleasure. So at the very outset, the essayist divides labor or manual work or exercise into two categories. One is what you do when your livelihood depends on it, when you make it a means of earning for yourself and for your family. The other, he says, is that of pleasure, and that pleasure is what you get from the confidence that you are physically fit. All right, so two categories: that which you do for your livelihood, that would be classified as business or as work, and that which you do for pleasure, which is exercise for the sake of exercise. The latter of them generally changes the name of labor for that of exercise. We've already done that, but differs only from ordinary labor as it arises from another motive. So the only difference is in the motive. The work that is done is the same. There might be different modes, but the work done is the same. The effort that is involved is the same. So two categories, one for business, the other for pleasure. A country life abounds in both these kinds of labor, and for that reason gives a man greater stock of health and consequently a more perfect enjoyment of himself than any other way of life. Again, this is something that is an age-old aphorism, that life in the country is healthier than life in the city. The reason being that the countryside, the rural areas, the villages as we would call them in Pakistan, give you a better locale, give you a better environment for physical labor of any kind. And we're going to be discussing this in greater detail as we proceed with the essay. For the time being, let it suffice that work done in the countryside is healthier, and that is why it is preferable. Work done in the city is the same, but it does not get you the same result. I consider the body as a system of tubes and glands, and now here you have to start thinking of your body as a machine. Okay, so as he says, it is a system of tubes and glands, and in a minute he's going to explain to you what he means by tubes and glands. Or to use a more rustic phrase, a bundle of pipes and strainers. A very scientific term, pipes and strainers, fitted to one another after so wonderful a manner as to make a proper engine for the soul to work with. Now, when he says it's a bundle of pipes and strainers, he's looking at the physical body, the anatomy, and trying to convert it into simple terms, saying that you have blood vessels and you have vessels that carry oxygen to the blood, or you have muscles and you have tissues and you have ligaments and you have organs. That's a rather abstract format for someone who cannot see these things. And if you want to look at it from a very scientific and a very technical point of view, then he says that it is a bundle of pipes and strainers. Tubes or glands, pipes and strainers. The tubes related to the pipes, the glands related to the strainers. So in one sentence, he gives you such a very accurate and realistic image of the kind of setup that we have inside the body. It's very easy to imagine the body as a machine. He calls it an engine which contains the soul. So I call it a machine which houses the soul. And when he refers to the physical body as a bundle of pipes and strainers, he is referring to the fact that the glands act as strainers. The glands absorb the poison in the bloodstream and purify the blood, allow oxygen to circulate throughout our system. But more of that in a while. This description does not only comprehend the bowels, bones, tendons, veins, nerves and arteries, but every muscle and every ligature, which is a composition of fibers. There are so many imperceptible tubes or pipes interwoven on all sides with invisible glands or strainers. The human body is a very complex mechanism. It's mind-boggling when you try to think of what the skin contains. You know that the human body is covered by skin. If you were to take the skin off, if you were to take this cover off, everything inside would be exposed, and you would see the arteries, you would see the veins, you would see as he calls it, ligatures, you would see the muscles, you'd see the tendons, you'd see the bones, you'd see so many different things, you'd see the glands, you'd see what makes these glands. It's a confusing mass, but you see that every part, every component is in its assigned place, is in its proper place, and that is why the human body works as it does. So he says that when you say that the human body comprises of pipes and strainers or tubes and glands, you don't do justice to the human body. The human body is a far more complex mechanism. It's an engine, it's a machine that is made up of tiny components. They're tiny cogs in this machine which make the machine run smoothly and do not allow anything to interfere with the workings of this mechanism. So it's a very important machine. It's perhaps the most important machine in this whole world, that is the human body, because of all the different parts which comprise it. And a lot of it is invisible, a lot of it is so tiny that the human eye, the physical eye, cannot perceive it. There are sounds that are so infinitesimal that the human ear cannot perceive it, and yet they are there. Those sounds are there, those parts of the body do exist. It's a very highly scientific, complex mechanism. Okay? So this general idea of a human body, without considering it in its niceties of anatomy, let's see how absolutely necessary labor is for the right preservation of it. So he says we're not going to deal about the outside. We're not going to say such and such a body is beautiful, such and such a body is ugly, such features are pretty, such are handsome. We're not dealing with the outside. What we're concerned with is how far it is important for this body to work if it is to preserve its fitness. The human body must be put to work. Each component of this mechanism must work regularly in order to make this entire mechanism work at peak performance. So he says labor is necessary. There must be frequent motions and agitations to mix, digest, and separate the juices contained in it, as well as to clear and cleanse that infinitude of pipes and strainers of which it is composed, and to give their solid parts a more firm and lasting tone. Muscles are the more solid part. Bones are the more solid part. So what is this entire mechanism? This is the human body. This is a machine which needs to work in coordination with other parts. All the different parts, all the different glands and pipes and strainers and tubes need to work in coordination with each other if this entire mechanism is going to work to its optimum. So he says it's not very easy to describe this mechanism, and we're not going to be concerned with the outward appearance, with the physical appearance, with the beauty or the ugliness. We are concerned with how important it is to keep this machine in working order. You know, with machines they say if you don't put them to use, they will rust. The machine will rust, the machine will gather dust, and the different parts of the machine will not be able to work to optimum if proper care is not taken of it. And proper care is taken by making the machine work. Labor or exercise ferments the humors, casts them into their proper channels, throws off redundancies and helps nature in those secret distributions without which the body cannot subsist in its vigor, nor the soul act with cheerfulness. So labor is something that is definitely required to make the body work. Exercise is required if we are to get maximum benefit from the human body. Then we must make sure that it is working smoothly, that's working perfectly. So he says that exercise is necessary because it ferments the humors, it makes for a sort of catharsis of feelings, it channelizes feelings properly, it throws out what is not required in the form of waste, in the form of perspiration, in the form of excreta. Everything is excreted by the body that is not required. Whatever the human body doesn't require, it just throws out in various ways and helps nature in those secret distributions. So the human body, unless it is exercised, it will not throw out whatever is not required. Have you noticed that when you undertake very strenuous exercise, your body starts perspiring? Now, what does that show? It shows that the body is throwing out excess water in the form of perspiration. You work, your muscles and your ligaments are strained, and the excess water comes out in the form of sweat. So it is very necessary for the body to throw out what is not required, and unless it does that, the body cannot maintain its vigor, its strength, nor the soul act with cheerfulness. So unless you have all the waste material thrown out of the body, neither the body nor the soul can function. And how is it that he talks about the functions of the body? He says the effects which this has upon all the faculties of the mind by keeping the understanding clear, the imagination untroubled, and refining those spirits that are necessary for the proper exertion of our intellectual faculties during the present laws of union between soul and body. Soul and body are one, that is a union. And this union is broken only when the soul leaves the body and rises. So the present situation that we're talking about, the present state that we're talking about, is of the body and soul united. They stay united during your lifetime. And it is only when you are dead that the soul and the body are separated, and then the body becomes a husk, a shell, when the soul is taken away. And very soon the shell deteriorates, disintegrates, because it's the soul which keeps the body alive. So it is very necessary for human beings to get physical exercise, not only so that their bodies will keep working smoothly, but also so that the mind will work, so that the soul has a place to call its own. The mind cannot exist outside the body. It is a force, it is an abstraction. It needs the human body. The human body is a receptacle. And with the soul taken out of it, the receptacle becomes empty, deteriorates, disintegrates, perishes, becomes dust which goes into dust. It is to a neglect in this particular that we must ascribe the spleen. And here the word spleen is not used for the organ alone, it is also used for splenetic humor or poison which is secreted by this very necessary organ. And it is so frequent in men of studious and sedentary tempers as well as the vapors to which those of the other sex are so often subject. So, if the spleen does not absorb the poison from the bloodstream, it is said that so and so has splenetic humor because so and so is always saying bad things, is always spewing out poison in the form of speech. And you only do that, he says, when your spleen is not working as a strainer. The spleen is one of those glands or strainers which take the poison and keep the poison inside so that the blood is purified and the blood circulates throughout the body. Now here the idea that he's giving you of splenetic humor is that of people who are bad-tempered, people who are short-tempered, who get angry very quickly. And he's also referring to what he calls vapors as far as women are concerned. So the women of the 18th century were still considered very delicate. And so if something let's say something bad happened, they would just faint because it was said that they're so delicate that their spleens cannot absorb all that poison, cannot absorb all that negative energy that is being channelized throughout the human body. So men who are of studious and sedentary tempers, men who don't get much exercise, or women who don't get much exercise, he says this is the one reason why they collapse easier and earlier than do men and women whose spleens are working fine and who get exercise. If you get exercise, your spleen will work. If you don't get exercise, your glands will stop working, the poison will not be absorbed from the bloodstream, that poisonous blood will circulate throughout your body, you will die. The soul will leave the receptacle. The soul will be separated from the body. And of course, by saying this, the essayist is also referring to the fact that women were so delicate that if they were given some kind of bad news, they would just faint dead away and go like this. So the spleen must function, and in order for the spleen to function, the human body must be exercised. Had not exercise been absolutely necessary for our well-being, nature would not have made the body so proper for it by giving such an activity to the limbs. You know, you can move your limbs around, you can jump up and down, you can move your legs up and down, and such a pliancy to every part as necessarily produces those compressions, extensions, contortions, dilatations, and all other kinds of motions that are necessary for the preservation of such a system of tubes and glands as has been before mentioned. So if the human body had been made in any other way, then exercise would not have been required. The fact is that nature has made the human body so flexible. You just think of the way that you move your facial features. You just think of the blinking of the eyes, the motions of the different muscles. When you speak, there are thousands of muscles that are working at the same time. I'm teaching, I'm moving my hands, I'm moving my limbs, I'm moving my entire upper torso. If the human body had not been made for exercise, we would not have been able to move an inch. The human body is pliable, is flexible. It can be twisted, it can be turned. There are so many different positions that can be adopted, and all because the human body requires exercise. It requires work. Okay? So this system of tubes and glands would have been different if exercise had not been necessary for the human body, and that we might not want inducements to engage us in such an exercise of the body as is proper for its welfare. It is so ordered that nothing valuable can be produced without it. If I don't move my hand, I cannot teach. And the majority of teachers teach not only through speech, but also through gestures. So I often say, if you were to tie my hands, I wouldn't be able to teach, because there's as much expression in my hands and in my body as there is on my face, as there is in my voice. So everything works together, and if we do not exercise it, we will not be able to justify the existence of all the different muscles, all the millions of muscles that make up the human body. Not to mention riches and honor. Even food and raiment are not to be come at without the toil of the hands and sweat of the brows. You know it, I know it. Everyone knows that unless you move, you will not get anything. You will not get education, you will not be able to wear clothes, you will not be able to eat, you will not be able to breathe. Everything involves work, everything involves exercise. And if we don't exercise, if we just stay like that, we're going to die like that. We're not going to be able to do anything. When we need to use the toilet, we need to work. We need to get up and go to the toilet. When we need to eat food, we need to move to a place where food has already been placed. We need to sit down, pick up the food, put it in your mouth, chew it, masticate it, and then only will it be digested. Without movement, without exercise, it's not possible. So, and it's not just food and clothes, but our position in society, our status in society, how important are we for a community. All these depend on how much work we can do, how much exercise we can get from our body. Providence furnishes materials. The Lord Almighty has given us the body, has given us the muscles, the ligaments, the glands. But Providence also expects us to work for ourselves. Nature, God Almighty, Allah Ta'ala, the Supreme Being, the divine forces, whatever names you give them, they have given us the human body with the expectation that we will use this body for maximum benefit. Sitting idle, sleeping all day, we will not be able to accomplish anything. We have to get up and work. The earth, and look at the example that he's giving you. The earth must be labored before it gives its increase. And when it is forced into its several products, how many hands must they pass through before they are fit for use? Even the earth does not produce unless we work on it. We have to dig the soil. We have to sow the seeds. We have to water the plants, the saplings. we have to make sure that the plants have sufficient oxygen, sufficient room to breathe in. Then and then only will those plants give us fruit. It can be in the form of flowers, it can be in the form of vegetables, it can also be in the form of what we call fruit, what we eat as fruit. So, all these are possible only when the earth is worked upon. The earth produces only when the human being does work on it. So how can the human being produce anything without doing any work? And then once that produce is ripe for harvesting, you harvest it and then you process it. You don't start eating it fresh from the ground. You wash it, clean it, dry it. Sometimes you process it in the sense that you take it to the factory. Maybe you want canned peas, maybe you want canned tomatoes, and they're not available because there's no season. So what you do is, when there is a lot of produce, you put them into tin cans and you seal them in liquids or in powder form, and then when you want to cook it, all you need to do is open up the can and there's your vegetables, there's your meat or whatever. So a lot of work has to be done before you can actually use the product. Manufacturers, trade and agriculture naturally employ more than 19 parts of the species in 20. And as for those who are not obliged to labor by the condition in which they are born, they are more miserable than the rest of mankind, unless they indulge themselves in that voluntary labor which goes by the name of exercise. So people who don't need to work, people who have enough money, who have a social position which allows them to enjoy the fruits of others' labors, even those people need exercise. If you lie in bed the whole day and don't move, you will not feel hungry. Maybe for the first couple of hours you will feel hungry, but after that, because you've not done any work, because you've not moved around, you won't feel hungry. So he says that people who are born in a position where they don't need to work for a livelihood, they must then take up this labor as exercise, because unless the human body is exercised, it will not digest anything that it takes in. And for these people, this physical labor goes by the name of exercise. All right, let's move on. And he moves on to an example. Remember, in the very early essays, perhaps it was the second lecture where he introduced Sir Roger de Coverley as one of his group of friends. So this is where he brings in Sir Roger de Coverley, and he says, my friend Sir Roger has been an indefatigable man in business of this kind. He is a great one for exercising and has hung several parts of his house with the trophies of his former labors. Now here he brings in a slightly different interpretation of the word labor or the term exercise. And this exercise has to do with the field of hunting, which is what Sir Roger de Coverley takes especially keen interest in. The walls of his great hall, and now what is being described here is the house or the castle of Sir Roger de Coverley, and he says the great halls, they have walls that are covered with horns of several kinds of deer that he has killed in the chase. Hunting, you know, was very fashionable and was a very essential part of the lifestyle of the aristocracy. So what he's focusing on here is hunting as sport, hunting as exercise. And for the aristocracy, for those people who did not have to work for a livelihood, hunting was an essential component of life. You had to be a good hunter, otherwise you were not declared a part of the aristocracy. So he says that he has hunted several different kinds of deer. And you know how it is with hunters, when they kill an animal, they make sure that they kill it in such a way that the hide, the skin, can be stuffed and displayed as a trophy. And in the house of Sir Roger de Coverley, these trophies have a very special standing, a very special place. And he calls it a furniture of his house, because it's something that decorates his house. And of course, it not only decorates his house, but it also gives him the chance or the topic of conversation with people. You know, he could say, you know, this animal I hunted when I went to such and such a place, and I had to chase him for a very long time. Deer are swift in movement. So are foxes, so are rabbits. And these three categories he discusses when he talks about hunting. At the lower end of the hall is a large otter skin stuffed with hay, and this otter skin is particularly important for Sir Roger de Coverley, because the essayist says that he was only 9 years old when Sir Roger de Coverley's dog killed this otter. And so, since the dog belonged to Sir Roger de Coverley, his mother quickly had the skin cleaned and stuffed and displayed inside the house. A little room adjoining the hall is a kind of arsenal. So it's not just that he has a trophy room. He also has what is called a gun room, or an arsenal, where he has weapons of different kinds, and where he keeps, let's say, the bullets that are used in those different kinds of guns, different weapons. All of them are displayed in the arsenal, and these are weapons that have killed thousands of birds and animals in that vicinity. And he says the stable doors, because he ran out of room inside the hall, so what he did was he fixed the heads of the foxes on the door of the stable. Sir Roger showed me one that for distinction's sake has a brass nail stuck through it, which cost him about 15 hours riding, carried him through half a dozen counties. A little bit of exaggeration here, you have to bear that in mind. Killed him a brace of geldings and lost above half his dogs. So this is a very precious fox, because it's been chased for a long time, and Sir Roger de Coverley continued the chase. He didn't give it up until he had the fox killed, and then he had a brass nail stuck through it to differentiate it from the other foxes that he has hunted. So this is supposed to be one of the greatest exploits of his life. The Perverse Widow, and this is the widow that was referred to in the earlier essay, and who jilted Sir Roger de Coverley, and as a result of which Sir Roger never married. So the same widow is being referred to here, and what the essays say is that several foxes were killed because this perverse widow was cruel to Sir Roger de Coverley. So he says whenever the widow was cruel, the foxes were sure to pay for it. So whenever the widow was cruel or did not pay heed to Sir Roger de Coverley's attentions, his sentiments and his emotions, when Sir Roger came back, he would go out hunting in an attempt to have a catharsis of his feelings of frustration and anger, resentment, sorrow. He would go out hunting. So who had to pay for the widow's cruelties? The poor foxes. The more the widow was cruel, the more the number of foxes that Sir Roger killed. So it was a sort of proportionate thing. If the widow was sweet with him, the foxes survived. If the widow was cruel and ignored him, avoided him, Sir Roger went out hunting and he killed as many foxes as he could find. So as his passion for the widow abated with the passage of time, you know that he accepted the fact that this beautiful widow would not marry him. She was a very wealthy widow also. She lived in the county next to him. And when he realized that she was not going to marry him, he got used to that idea. And that is where you have the difference between youth and age. When he was young, if the widow was cruel to him, he took it out on the foxes, and he went out hunting, and he hunted dozens of foxes. He'd kill them all, stuff them up, and put their heads on his walls. So he hunted foxes when the widow was cruel to him. And as he grew older, he realized that his passion, his emotions and sentiments for the widow were no longer as strong as they were in his youth. But he still goes out rabbit hunting. And he says there's not a hare that is yet safe within 10 miles of the house. There's no kind of exercise which I would so recommend to my readers of both sexes as this of riding, as there is none which so much conduces to health and is every way accommodated to the body according to the idea which I have given of it. Now, he says riding is the best exercise. There's no other exercise which equals the amount of physical fitness that you get out of riding, or the amount of intellectual comfort that is derived. Of course, there's a reason for this. When you're riding, obviously you don't ride in streets. You go out into the countryside, you go to the village, you go to the rural areas, and that's where you ride. You don't ride in city streets, you don't ride in the urban areas. So when you go out into the countryside, the air of the countryside is unpolluted. It's pure, unadulterated oxygen. And that is very good for all your system. It cleanses your entire body. And when you have a healthy body, you'll obviously have a healthy mind. So he says that riding is absolutely necessary for good health. Dr. Sidon Ham is very lavish in his praises, and if the English reader will see the mechanical effects of it described at length, he may find them in a book published not many years since under the title of Medicina Gymnastica. So this is a book that's been written by Dr. Sidon Ham, and in this book he praises, he expresses his appreciation of exercise, because he is concerned with the effect that exercise has on the human body. So he is very, very keen advocate of exercise, and in particular riding as an exercise. And he's also discussed it in this book that's been published under the title of Medicina Gymnastica. For my own part, when I'm in town, for want of these opportunities, and now the essayist is going to describe how he exercises. When he's in town, when he's in the city, obviously he cannot go out riding. So what does he do? He exercises 1 hour every morning upon a dumbbell that is placed in a corner of his room. So there's dumbbells that he lifts up as weights, and he says that that is wonderful exercise. And he says, pleases me the more because it does everything I require of it in the most profound silence. So he doesn't need to go out, he doesn't need to make preparations for riding. He can just get up, pick up those dumbbells and exercise with them. Okay? He can do it in the morning, he can do it in his room, he doesn't need to go out, and the effect, he says, is the same. My landlady and her daughters are so well acquainted with my hours of exercise that they never come into my room to disturb me whilst I'm ringing. And this ringing is a play upon the word because he's talked about a dumbbell. A dumbbell actually does not ring. It's made of a piece of wood, and it's used for exercise. But the essayist picks up this one term and turns it around, plays upon the word bell. Since a bell is meant to be rung, he says, whenever I am practicing with the dumbbell, I am ringing. So he says, whenever I am ringing, the landlady and her daughter do not come to my room because they know that I'm exercising, and that is a time when I don't want to receive visitors. When I was some years younger than I am at present, I used to employ myself in a more laborious diversion, which I learned from a Latin treatise of exercises that is written with great erudition. It is there called the sciomachia, or the fighting of a man's own shadow. Shadow boxing, you've heard of it. You don't need anyone. What you do is you stand against the wall, there's light behind you, and you take up a stance and you box. So because there is your shadow on the wall, it looks as if you are boxing with yourself. So shadow boxing. So he says that this is also another thing that I used to do, but I don't anymore. And it consists in the brandishing of 2 short sticks grasped in each hand and leaden with plugs of lead at either end. So in order to make these sticks heavy and to make sure that exercise is being done, what they do is they attach gobs of lead at the end so that the ends become heavy, and you pick up the sticks and you flex your muscles so that your entire upper torso will exercise. This opens the chest, so it's good for the chest muscles. It exercises the limbs because you're moving your arms backwards and forwards, and gives a man all the pleasure of boxing without the downside or without the negative impact of boxing, without the blood, without getting bodily damage. You are still able to exercise and expand your chest and make your limbs very flexible. I could wish that several learned men would lay out at that time which they employ in controversies and disputes about nothing, in this method of fighting with their own shadows. So it might conduce very much to evaporate the spleen, which makes them uneasy to the public as well as to themselves. So what he's trying to say is that this is the kind of exercise that opens up the chest. It's good for all the different organs of the body. And the most wonderful thing is that when the body's fluids are excreted, the body feels lighter. When the body feels lighter, the mind conversely is also lighter and is able to function at its optimum. Okay? To conclude, and here he is winding up the essay. He says, as I am a compound of soul and body, I consider myself as obliged to a double scheme of duties, and I think I have not fulfilled the business of the day when I do not thus employ the one in labor and exercise, as well as the other in study and contemplation. If you go back to this quotation from Juvenal that he's given you at the very beginning, a sound mind and a healthy body, that is what he concludes with. He says that the human being is a compound of the soul and the body. You cannot separate the soul and say, this is Shahina Ayub Bhatti. You cannot separate the body and say, this is Shahina Ayub Bhatti. Together they make Shahina Ayub Bhatti. So the body and the soul are integral parts of what is termed the self. Without the body, the soul cannot function because the soul is abstract. Without the soul, the body cannot function because then the body is base. So the body is like a receptacle, like a vessel. The soul is poured into that body and contains that soul until its time in this world is complete. So you need to remember that the body and soul are integral to each other. You can't have the one without the other. There are people who say that, but these two are interdependent. The body cannot exist without the soul. The soul also will exist only in space. It will not exist in this world. It will exist in some other dimension. It will not exist on earth. And in order to exist on earth, in order to have its being on earth, you need to have the soul and the body combining. He says, because I feel very strongly about exercise, so I feel that it is an integral part of my life. And if I do not exercise early in the morning, it is almost as if I am not alive. It's like I don't exist. So exercise is an integral part of the essayist's lifestyle. The reason is exercise makes his body healthy. The healthy body is a stronger, more positive receptacle than a body which is unhealthy. So he exercises, whether it is dumbbells or some other form of exercise. He makes sure that he exercises on a very regular basis because he knows how important exercise is for his body to be healthy. And only if and when his body is healthy will he have positive thoughts, will he have good ideas. So a sound mind in a healthy body. You have to have care of the body. You have to ensure the health of the body. It's only when the body is healthy will the mind be free of concerns with the body and able to think about other things. Let me give you an example. You have a headache. Now that's a physical ailment. Your head aches, and what happens? You can't concentrate. You can't focus on work. Your head hurts, so your eyes also hurt because this whole place hurts. You might have an ache here only, in your temples. You might have one side of the head, which is called a migraine. But you will not be able to think. You won't be able to listen because the ears are a part of the head. You will not be able to see properly because you feel dizzy. You will not be able to eat properly, to drink, because your head hurts and you say, oh, I can't chew. Oh, I don't want drinks. If I have a cold fizzy drink, it will go to my head and my head will hurt even more. So all these are different aspects of looking at this phenomena of a sound mind in a healthy body. Before we wind up for today, let us quickly recap what the essayist is trying to tell us in this essay that is titled 115. So he starts off with the quote from Juvenal, which is a sound mind in a healthy body, and he goes on to discuss the different forms of exercise, and he says that there are two forms of exercise. One is called labor because you need to do it for your livelihood. You need to go out, you need to work, and only then will you be rewarded in the form of salary or whatever. So you must have a healthy body in order for the soul to also be healthy. You cannot concentrate, you cannot focus on anything if you are not feeling good. And so what the essayist is trying to tell us in this essay, which we're going to make the last of the series of essays from The Spectator, what he's trying to tell you is that exercise is very important. If it is a means of livelihood, then you don't have a choice. But otherwise also, in order for the mind to work, in order for the body to work in a healthy manner, you must have a healthy mind. You must have positive thoughts. You must not have negative thoughts, because negative energy is going to take something away from your mind, from your body. So he says that one of the persons that he talks about very frequently in these essays is Sir Roger de Coverley. So he gives in the example of Sir Roger de Coverley, and he says that he adopted riding and hunting as his most favored way of exercising. So Roger de Coverley is a rich aristocrat, so he doesn't need to work for a living, but he does need to exercise. So he goes out into the countryside, he rides, and while he rides, he hunts, because hunting is riding with a purpose. And this kind of an exercise, the essay says, is very good for the human body. And as far as Sir Roger de Coverley is concerned, the writer says that the walls of his hall plus the stable door are covered with trophies of different animals that he has hunted at different points in time. You might find the head of a deer. You might find foxes that are stuffed. You will even find an otter. And when he gives the story of the otter, it is particularly reminiscent because this was something that happened a very long time ago. And the essayist says that I was only 9 years old when my dog killed this otter. Mind you, he didn't do it himself. So he says, my dog did it, and my mother was so thrilled with it that she decided to have the skin of the otter stuffed and displayed in the house. So when Sir Roger de Coverley grew up, he made sure that this stuffed otter skin was displayed in a very prominent position because he was only 9 years old, and it is almost as if his mother makes this his achievement. Instead of it being the dog's achievement, he says that his mother sort of gives it to his credit because it was his dog. And after discussing the example of Sir Roger de Coverley, the essay says that riding is the best form of exercise because it opens up your mind, it exercises your body, and together they form this union that's called the human being. And since he is a compound of body and soul, he says, I make sure that I do my exercises on a very regular basis. He gives you the example of a pair of dumbbells that he keeps in his room, and he says that these are dumbbells that are slightly heavy. So when I get up in the morning, I do a little bit of weightlifting, and that, he says, opens up my chest. It allows me to breathe because I breathe fast when I'm exercising, and it also allows him to think about everything with a fresh mind. He brings a fresh approach to different ideas, and when his body is functioning at optimum performance level, his mind also functions in a way that is satisfactory. So a sound mind in a healthy body, the body is healthy, the soul, the mind will be contained. If the soul is not well, the body also will suffer. Okay? That's it for today. Thank you for your patience. And remember, in the next class, you have to read up a bit about Charles Lamb and his style of writing essays, because when we meet in the next class, we're going to be discussing Lamb's essays, Lamb's historical background, the kind of work that he did, and how different his essays are from the essays that we have done so far. And you will see when we start doing the essays of Ilya, how very different the style is, how very different the choice of vocabulary becomes when you switch from Addison and Steele and you go on to Charles Lamb. So once again, thank you very much for being patient. In the next class, we're going to start Charles Lamb and his essays. Don't forget to read up Charles Lamb. Thank you. Allah Hafiz.